Good morning. My Sunday school teacher, Mac McCorkadale, who was an attorney by trade and a mentor to me in my faith, used to say that if Jesus was practicing law, he would have been the greatest attorney who ever lived. And he meant that. He would say, watch Jesus with the Pharisees. They come at him with a trap, a gotcha question, a legal technicality meant to back Jesus into a corner, and every single time he takes their own words, he takes their own logic, their own scripture, and turns it back on them so cleanly that they're just left standing there with nothing left to say. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Jesus says, show me a coin. Whose image is on it? They would ask him who sinned, the blind man, this man or his parents. Jesus would say neither. Time after time, the Pharisees, or anybody else for that matter, not once ever got the better of him. Except in today's story. Today in Matthew 15, Jesus meets someone who out-argues him. And I don't say that lightly. And I don't say it to be provocative either. I say it because that is, as near as I can tell, exactly what happens in this text. And the person that outwits him, a Canaanite woman, a woman with no name, no status, no standing in the community, no standing in that world that she lives in, goes toe-to-toe with the greatest orator and teacher who ever lived, and she wins. And in her winning, something in Jesus himself gets stretched open a little wider. This is one of those gospel stories that I have to sit with every time it comes around in the lectionary, because it doesn't behave the way our other stories about Jesus behave. There's no meek and mild here. There's no immediate compassion, no soft, focused healing scene. There is silence, there's a refusal, and there is an insult. And there is a woman who will not let any of that stop her. So let's look at this. Let's look at this scene, because the geography here matters more than we think. Jesus has just come off a hard confrontation with the religious leaders back home. The usual arguments about clean and unclean, purity and law. And right after that, Matthew tells us Jesus withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon. That's not a random detail. That's Gentile territory. Up on the far northwest edge of Israel. Enemy ground. Old enemy ground. For a Jewish rabbi to walk into Tyre and Sidon in the first century would be something like crossing a border that you don't ever cross. It's foreign soil. It's foreign gods. It's foreign people. And it is precisely there, out on that border, out into what we call the borderlands, that a local woman comes out to meet him. And Matthew doesn't just call her a Gentile. He calls her a Canaanite. And if you know your Old Testament, you know that word carries weights. Canaanites weren't just any foreigner. They were the ancient bitter enemies of Israel. The people the Israelites were supposed to have driven out of the land generations before this. So when this woman approaches Jesus, she's not just crossing an ethnic line or a religious line. She is walking across centuries of hostility, of an us against them, to get to him. Jew and Gentile, male and female, friend and enemy. All of it stacked up between them like a wall. And she starts shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." Now notice this. She shouts. She doesn't walk up and tap Jesus on the shoulder. She shouts from a distance, because the distance is real. All those walls I just named are standing between them. And so she does what people do when they come up to a wall that's too tall to climb. She raises her voice and hopes it carries over it. And notice this also. She doesn't say, "Have mercy on my daughter." She says, "Have mercy on me." Her daughter is the one tormented, but the mother is the one that's drowning. If you have ever sat in a hospital waiting room while someone you love suffers, if you've ever watched a child struggle and felt every ounce of that pain land in your own chest like it was yours to carry, then you know exactly what this woman means. A mother watching her child suffer is a mother who is suffering. "Lord, have mercy on me," she cries, out there on the border, because her daughter's torment has become her own torment. And Jesus, the one who always has an answer, says nothing, not one word. His silence is the first sign this encounter is going to unmake something in him before it's over. Let's sit with that silence, because most of us know that silence intimately. We have cried out, "Lord, have mercy on me," and heaven doesn't answer. The psalmist knew this too. "Oh my God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not answer." See, out in the borderlands of our lives, when that diagnosis comes back, when our marriage seems to be falling apart, when our depression will not lift, when our child is struggling and we don't know how to help them, we cry out, and sometimes we get back silence. It's not punishment, it's not rejection, but it's silence. The awful quiet at the border between heaven and earth. The question that this story asks of her and asks of us is simple. What do you do with the silence? Do you turn around and go home? Or do you keep shouting at it? She keeps shouting. We know this because of what the disciples say next. Not to her, but they say it to Jesus about her. "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." She keeps shouting after us. Even in the annoyance of the disciples, we hear the truest compliment this woman receives in the whole story, that she's someone who will not stop. Hope deferred, it seems, did not make her heart sick. Finally, Jesus does speak, but not to her, to the disciples. And about her, he says, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." That's a refusal. It's also restating exactly the boundary we already knew was there. Jewish Messiah, Gentile woman. Case closed, as far as Jesus is concerned. He's not being cruel, so much as he's operating exactly within the lines everyone, including him at this point, assumed were the lines of God's mission. But she does not accept that the case is closed. She comes closer this time. Scandalously close for a Gentile woman approaching a Jewish man in public. And she kneels. If shouting from a distance didn't work, she'll close the distance herself. "Lord, help me," she says. Those 3 words. No more arguments. No more theology. Just help me. And here Jesus says the hard thing. The thing we wish wasn't in our Bibles. "Is it not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs?" There's no way to soften that quote. Dogs in that world were not the beloved pets that we think of. Dogs were scavengers. Dogs were unclean. Dogs were contemptible. To call a Gentile a dog was a known slur, and Jesus uses it. I don't really know what to say about that, except to tell you that the truth of the text, rather than dress it up as something more comfortable, Jesus in this moment speaks the boundary out loud, and that boundary has teeth. Now, what would you do if you had crossed all that distance, knelt in the dust in front of a stranger, begged for your dying child, and been called a dog for your trouble? But this is where the story turns. She takes that insult and turns it into an argument. Yes, Lord, she says, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Yes, Lord, send the food to the children first. I'm not disputing your mission to Israel, but even the dogs under the table get something. Even the dogs get crumbs. This is brilliant. This is Middle Eastern banter at its sharpest. Take your opponent's own words and hand it back to them, transformed. That's the Jesus that Mac McCorkadale was talking about. He always used his opponent's words against him. But here, for once, someone does it to him. The great English preacher J.C. Ryle, writing a century and a half ago in his expository on the gospel, puts it this way: "Yet hope deferred did not make her heart sick. Even then she is not silenced. Even then she finds some crumbs of mercy." Even then, even after the silence, the refusal, and even being called a dog to her face, she finds some crumbs of mercy, because she will not stop looking for them. At that moment, something breaks open in Jesus. Maybe his own sense of mission is being enlarged by this in real time. But something shifts. He says, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed that very hour. At that very hour, the wall between Jew and Gentile, insider, outsider, us versus them, it didn't get politely negotiated away. It got argued down by a desperate, faithful, unshakable mother who would not go home empty-handed. So here's where our story stops being ancient history and starts getting a little uncomfortable for us here in the present. Because of Jesus himself had a category of person he initially assumed was outside the reach of God's mercy. A category he had to be argued out of by a woman with more faith than fear. And I think we need to ask ourselves honestly, who is that for us? I'm not going to just sit here and give you a whole list of people. See, that would be too easy. That would actually let you off the hook. You just nod along and think about somebody else's prejudice instead of sitting with your own. This isn't a sermon about the news on television or a particular group of people. This is quieter than that. But not only is it quiet, it's hard. Who is it for you? Who is the person or the kind of person that some part of you, maybe a part you're not proud of, a part you'd never say out loud, has already decided doesn't quite belong at the table? Who is it whose suffering you've quietly filed under "not my problem"? Or they brought it on themselves? Whose faith, whose grief, whose desperate cry for mercy would surprise you, might even offend you a little if you heard it shouted from the borderland in your own life? So think about that silence that sat over that Canaanite woman before Jesus ever answered her. This is what I love about this story, and what terrifies me about it in the same time. The walls didn't come down because Jesus woke up one morning and more enlightened than he was. They came down because a woman who had every reason to give up and let God be moved by her, which means the walls in us, the quiet, respectable, church-going walls that we've built between us and whoever we decided is a dog. Those walls are not as permanent as they feel. They can come down, but usually not because we're enlightened on our own to tear them down. Usually it takes an encounter. It takes someone who didn't expect to matter, showing up at the border of our comfort and refusing to leave, refusing to be silent, until something in us breaks open the way something broke open in Jesus that day. Hear the good news buried in this hard text. Even dogs get crumbs. Even the ones we've written off. Even the ones we're ashamed to admit we've written off. There is no one standing so far out on the border that Christ's mercy cannot reach them. And you know what? If we're honest, that means us too. On our bad days, on our worst days, when we feel the most unworthy of a place at the table. So here's our challenge this week. It's a simple challenge, but it won't feel so simple once you start doing it. Name that person. Name that group. Do it privately, but do it honestly before God where no one else has to hear it but the two of you. And don't perform outrage at yourself. Don't let yourself off the hook that easy. Don't let yourself off the hook with, well, I try to love everybody. Think about it. Who is it for you? And then, this is the hard part. Dare to imagine them kneeling at the table with you. Not because you've decided to be generous, because Christ already decided the table is wider than you would have chosen. The Canaanite woman didn't not wait for permission to cross the border. She crossed it anyway. She knelt in the dust, refusing to be silent, until mercy met her. May we have half her courage to name our own borders, to stop protecting them, and to let Christ enlarge our hearts the way he enlarged his own. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. Thanks be to God, there are crumbs enough for all of us. Amen.